In our last episode, we analyzed the cosmic horror of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Today, we'll be looking at another one of Jhonen Vasquez's comics called Squee, which is titled after the child that appears in Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Now, unlike the previous comic, this comic has a very clear mission statement. In the first page of the first issue, Jhonen tells us that this has to do with the concept of childhood fear. And it is expressed in this volume pretty well. But somehow it also has an overarching story that does connect back to things that happen in Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which leads to very many questions. So please join me as I roughly summarize the plot of Squee. I will be spoiling as much of it as I possibly can. So if you are interested in checking it out yourself, you're unaware of it, please go check it out now. Come back to the video later. But otherwise, join me as we enter the horrifying world of childhood trauma in Squee. Our first comic shows Squee standing on his bed, trying to have a prayer to God, offering God money to make his dad happy again. And we get a jump over to his dad wishing that Squee was never born, so probably a good thing that God didn't answer that prayer. After his prayer, he heads to bed, and around 2 a.m., he's awoken in the middle of the night as aliens have come to abduct him, which, we're just already in Weirdsville, great. But not only one pair of aliens has come to abduct him, but another group of aliens has also come to abduct him. They argue over who actually has the right to abduct Squee, only for one of the aliens, the dumber group of the two, to accidentally kidnap his Batman plushie. So he ends up getting taken by these aliens, which kind of look like Urkins from Invader Zim, so that's a fun little nod. Squee eventually shows back up at home about 2 days later, and his parents don't even notice that he was missing. They don't even recognize him. They think he's one of Squee's friends, and they're very dismissive of him, send him on his way to school, his mom commenting that she thought he already graduated. So he walks to school and he sees a kid get mauled by a dog, which sends the poor kid into a terrified frenzy running to school. At school that day, we find out Johnny, his neighbor from the previous comic we looked at, has been leaving him dead animals. So he brings that in for show and tell. And also, for some reason, his teacher is Miss Bitters from Invader Zim. So that's fun. A new kid is introduced. He is the literal Antichrist, son of Satan, who goes by the name Pepito. He gives a little bit of a dark, angsty speech, and when he's interrupted by one of the other kids, decides to melt the kid's face with his laser finger. And this causes everyone to panic. Squee runs out of the school and is approached by Pepito, who tells him that he wants to be friends with him, something that Squee is understandably cautious about. I mean, would you be friends with the Antichrist? I mean, I would. I don't know, put your thoughts down in the comments for me. We get a quick flash of one of Squee's dreams where he's in a pod being bidded on by multiple groups of aliens, which kind of reasonable considering his most recent experience. And it's important to note that all of the dreams are designated by a big old thing that says dream time. So there's no confusion as to what is real and what is a dream in this comic. Volume 2 of this comic opens up with Squee in the car saying that he needs to use the washroom. His parents aren't happy about it, thinking he's already used the washroom, but they stop anyway. He goes in, steps to the urinal, starts doing his business, and a man in the stall next to him is screaming out in intense pain. And before long, some blood starts flying out from under the stall. Where it's coming from, anyone's guess, but it's coming out from under the stall, and it's spreading everywhere, and this obviously terrifies our poor little protagonist, victim. I don't know what role Squee fills in this comic, but I'm for the ride. Our next installment has Squee being visited by his future self. And Squee has a lot of questions, obviously, but unfortunately, traveling back in time causes you to lose 80% of your memory. And you're not allowed to show your past self, your future self. So he's in this weird costume, this like costume that's supposed to look like Child Squee. And it turns out the time travel system hasn't been worked out perfectly because future Squee's spine starts dissolving. So he has to go back to the future and file a lawsuit or something. And that's the end of this little section. I just think it's a lot of fun. Imagine we come up with time travel, and in order to travel back in time, you have to give up 80% of your memory, so you can't even do anything. You just go back to the past and you don't know why. Jhonen Vasquez has the weirdest sense of humor, and I just love it. We get another Dreamtime sequence where Squee seems to finally be having a nice dream where he's flying, but then he starts getting projected faster and faster, which is obviously terrifying. He's grabbed out of the sky by his teddy bear Shmee, which he has a conversation with, and Shmee tells him that he's not there to help him and make the nightmares go away. Shmee is a trauma sponge. Shmee feeds on Squee's nightmares and fears, and Squee is terrified of everything, so he's eating good. And this is actually a really good nod back to Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, where Johnny said that the bear was a vile creature. And that seems to be true if this dream is to be believed. Our next official comic in this issue is Squee being left alone with his granddad. We're told that his granddad has a lot of money and that his parents want to keep him happy so that they can get that money when he dies. Well, it starts out normal, even though Squee doesn't like his granddad because he's crazy. And the granddad does a little quarter trick, you know, where you pull the quarter out of a kid's ear, but it's really, you just kind of hit it. Well, he does that trick and then has a little bit of a senile episode, gets confused, thinks Squee's trying to steal his money, starts chasing him around the house saying he's going to eat him, and that's how he stays alive. He's been eating the firstborn of all of his children, and that's why his children hate him. It's a really weird section, but Squee nearly escapes because his granddad falls asleep. Honestly, kind of horrifying section there. I'm not 100% sure what to make of that, but I think his cruel parents are starting to make a little more sense considering this is the granddad. We get one more dream sequence before the comic ends of a monster dragging a bunch of kids into Squee's closet. You know, just to make the kid more terrified of his closet or his room. It's a kind of a terrifying concept if true. The next section, issue 3, opens up with Squee trying to tell his dad about dust mites and how he's terrified of dust mites. The father doesn't care, predictably, so Squee goes up to his room and starts trying to cleanse his room of all the dust, shaking his pillowcase out the window, to which a giant dust mite falls out of the window. The dust mite is mad, stomps back into the house, cracks through Squee's door, and tells Squee that he's an idiot because dust mites only eat dead skin. But then the monster gets the idea that, you know, if he killed Squee, then he'd be able to eat the whole body because it would all be dead skin. Before the monster can strike, though, turns out Squee had turned on his air conditioner for some reason, running an experiment, and the lack of moisture has a negative effect on the dust mite, which he proceeds to throw out the window, but not before the dust mite screams in its final moments that he laid a bunch of eggs in Squee's head. I gotta say, the humor in this comic is much better than Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Squee's next little terror comes when he falls asleep and ends up facing the wrong way. He normally likes to face his window and door, but he's got his back to it now. And behind him, there's a ghost girl who died in that room, and she's talking to Squee. He asks how she died, and it turns out she died because she got a toy from McDonald's, and it said, you know, don't put it in your mouth because choking hazard, and as an act of rebellion for all children who've been talked down to by the toy industry, she put it in her mouth and subsequently choked. She says it gets lonely there, and it would be nice if Squee died in this room too so that she could have a friend. At which point Squee goes outside to sleep on the lawn. Probably a good choice. Though mad respect for the ghost girl, that's some really anti-authoritarian thinking, and I do respect you on that. Wasn't the best choice, but I respect it. Our next comic is Squee getting bullied at school, and him finding himself a friend on the way home. It's a dog that wants to follow him home and be his friend. But Squee tells the dog that he should probably go away because his life is cursed. It seems like a cruel, cartoonist joke, even commenting on how weird the dog looks, saying that the cartoonist clearly doesn't know what a dog looks like. A little bit of meta humor in there. So Squee throws a ball for the dog to go chase so he can get away without the dog following him and getting involved in his horrible life. And the dog gets the ball, and then he gets hit by a car. The dog tries to drag the ball back to Squee and gets hit by a bus and continues to crawl, its body now looking like a toothpaste thing all wrung out. And then it gets ran over by a tricycle, and then its poor little life. I guess everything that Squee touches dies. And that's kind of sad. Our next comic involves Squee going over to Pepito's house. You remember Pepito, the Antichrist? Well, his parents have set up a play date for him, and he's going over to their house because his parents would rather go see a movie than make sure their kid isn't hanging out with the Antichrist. He goes over, and he sees a burning stove of souls in the basement, and that scares him. Turns out, I guess the devil brings his work home with him, and his dad does show up looking like a normal businessman before turning into the devil, and it's the same devil we saw back in Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, kind of confirming that Johnny did actually die and come back to life. So there's a lot of confirmation happening in this comic that I absolutely love. It takes a lot of my theories and makes them real, and I love that. I love that so much. I love being right. Pepito wants Squee to join the army of the damned and be his friend, at which point Satan offers Squee a deal. He says he will make his life better, get rid of all of his fears and all of his nightmares, if only he gives a small registration fee, probably his soul. And Squee says no thanks. They finish dinner and Squee leaves relatively unharmed. The family seems relatively nice except for the volatile child. We get one more dream sequence, and it's of Squee having a big old growth on the top of his head, and a doctor commenting that it's benign, despite being made up of horrifying, monstrous faces. Issue 4 opens up with Squee getting a letter from some aliens telling him to be home between a certain time and to not resist, and we see the aliens from the first issue, the dumb ones, not the ones that look like Irkins. And they're here to take Squee, but Squee convinces them to take his parents because, logically speaking, there's 2 of them, and they're bigger than him, so there's more meat on them. And they're happy with this deal. They take the parents and leave Squee on his own, and that seems to work out pretty well for the kid. Our next segment has Squee being bullied on the playground, and a girl laughing at him. And she gets hit in the head with a baseball so hard that one of her eyes kind of just pops out, and that terrifies Squee. For a moment, he was happy to see someone get justice for bullying him, only to be terrified again. This poor kid is afraid of everything and is somehow destined to just see horrific things. He probably needs to get rid of that teddy bear. I gotta be honest. Our next section is a little bit weird. It's Squee back in class, and Miss Bitters is quizzing him as he's doodling away, and she asks him, when did Columbus discover America? And Squee says 1492, and she says that's wrong, it's 1429. Well, turns out Squee's correct, and he also questions how Columbus could have discovered America if people were already here before he got here, which is honestly a great question that more kids should ask their teachers. I just want to see their heads spin. As Squee fights back against the disinformation of Miss Bitters, she reveals that all the kids are meant to learn facts because they don't have time to teach big concepts like philosophy or art. So all they can do is force facts down the kids, and they've been putting drugs in the water and the food to make them more complacent, more easy to control when they're adults, which kind of feels a bit like a criticism of like the overuse of Ritalin back in the 90s, probably when Jhonen was coming up. Miss Bitters orders her zombie students to attack Squee, and he is saved by Pepito, the Antichrist, who, despite not taking the deal, still thinks of Squee as a friend, and honestly, kind of a nice moment. Turns out the Antichrist, despite being volatile as all hell, you know, he's an okay guy. He's out there looking out for Squee. He's out there looking out for his friends. Squee's parents show back up eventually, arriving on the lawn completely nude. And Squee asks how it was with the aliens. They don't remember nothing about the aliens, but they've decided that Squee is insane, so they're going to take him to an asylum. And they take him to, and I'm not kidding here, a building called the Defective Headmate Institute, which is so... I love it so much. It's such a dumb way to put it, but I love it. The doctor merely just looks in Squee's ear and he's like, yep, he's insane. And the parents sign him over to the asylum. And at this point we learn where Johnny's been this whole time. He's been at the asylum. And they've been studying him, doing sleep studies, because apparently Johnny doesn't sleep for long periods of time. He has a little bit of the hypnophobia, which is something that the author Jhonen Vasquez has himself. So we get a little bit of dialogue about him talking about his dreams and about how time works for him. And we're learning that the events of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac are canon and are real events. And I think that's really interesting. I wish I could spend more time on this section, but this is about Squee. Johnny signs himself out of the institute saying he's done there, and he nods to Squee as Squee is in some sort of restraints and got a big old thing on his head that's probably going to shock him or do something terrible. We finish out the comic with one more dream time, where Squee is dreaming of being in his padded cell surrounded by drawings and all of these weird other things, like a rat nailed to the wall, and he's got Shmee there with him, which is probably the worst thing that could possibly be brought into the hospital with him. And he's got like a pentagram on his head. He's gone nuts. He's evil. He's become basically Johnny. Which does raise the question, is Johnny future Squee? I don't know for sure, but might be possible. Maybe that's why Johnny took a liking to Squee and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Hard to say. And that is the end of the 4 issues of Squee. The story of Squee is mostly a bit of navel-gazing about Jhonen's own fears as a child, but it's weaved into this narrative that kind of ties up Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. And the humor is much more on point. It's important to note that when this was made, Jhonen was already working on Invader Zim, so you could see that Miss Bitters, the teacher from Invader Zim, is here. A few of the students that would show up in Invader Zim are here. And we also see that there's just a lot of hints to what's coming in Invader Zim if you were paying attention to these comics back in the day. So what can we take away from all this? Well, Squee is a haunted individual. He somehow draws to him supernatural creatures, and it seems to be related to his bear Shmee. And because of that, he is constantly besieged by the worst terrors, because those terrors feed this entity that lives in this stuffed bear. Something that Johnny tried to deal with in Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. The horror in here is from the perspective of a child, so a lot of it could be overblown. But we do have sections designated as dream time, so we know that the events in this story are probably real. I think what this work tries to do is play up how much scarier mundane things like dust mites and dogs and embarrassment and people who are just kind of like the Antichrist can be when you're a child. How much things can be worse if you don't have a support system at home. And I think it reflects the author's own personal experience to a certain degree. Maybe he didn't have the best home life. Maybe he knew someone who didn't. Maybe he just felt misunderstood. But at the end of the day, Squee is an excellent piece of isolationist horror, where someone who has no support system is forced to deal with things beyond their comprehension. It doesn't get as far as like cosmic horror when it comes to like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, but it does touch on more supernatural horror, more relatable horror, like the fear of being abducted and the fear of dealing with religious figures. It feels like a love letter to Jhonen's own possibly tumultuous past. And honestly, it speaks to me on a certain level. And if it speaks to you, hey, go check it out and tell me what you thought down in the comments. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I will be uploading the video for I Feel Sick very soon, the last comic before Invader Zim comics written by Jhonen, so look out for that. Share the video around if you'd be so kind, or if you know somebody who might be interested, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.